They asked the chubby daughter of the black maid to dance as a joke. Regretted it after the first. The lights in the gymnasium flickered above the polished hardwood floor, where rows of white folding chairs were neatly arranged in front of a makeshift stage draped with blue and gold streamers. It was Lincoln Academy's annual Spring Shine Talent Show, an event that, though advertised as a celebration of student creativity and inclusivity, was more of a social showcase for the most popular kids, the ones with perfect teeth, polished dance routines, and parents who sponsored school fundraisers. The kind of kids who walked through hallways with laughter trailing behind them like a perfume mist, who took up space like they owned the air. Jasmine Carter, however, didn't walk like that. She was 13, round in her cheeks and softer in the middle, with tight coils of natural hair that her mother lovingly braided every Sunday evening while humming Anita Baker. She wore glasses that slid down her nose when she got nervous, which was often. She wasn't popular. She wasn't loud. She didn't have TikToks that went viral or a friend group with coordinated outfits. She had books, oversized hoodies, and her imagination, and more often than not, the janitor closet, where she sometimes hid during lunch to avoid stares she could feel like heat lamps on her skin. And her mother, Loretta Carter, was the maid for the Chalmers family, the same family whose daughter, Kendall Chalmers, was president of the student council and could execute a pirouette so sharp it made teachers tear up. Loretta had worked for them for 11 years. She ironed their linens, prepared meals they never finished, and sometimes walked their dog when their housekeeper took weekends off. Every now and then, she would bring Jasmine along, not because the Chalmers invited her, but because childcare was expensive, and Jasmine was a quiet girl who kept to herself. It was Kendall's idea, the so-called joke. During lunch that week, she'd been sitting at a round table full of volleyball players, theater girls, and boys with hair carefully tousled to look accidental. She leaned forward, whispering with a giggle, "You know what would be hilarious? What if Jasmine Carter danced at the show? I mean, she's always watching from the back row like some kind of musical ghost. Let's see what she's got." The others laughed, not cruelly at first. It was the kind of laughter that bubbles up when you're sure the world will never challenge you. "We'll even sign her up anonymously. Say it's some kind of surprise act. People will love it." Irony is in, right? And so, 2 days before the show, Jasmine's name appeared on the final performance sheet taped outside the principal's office. She stared at it for a full minute, blinking, rereading it as if the letters would shift into something logical. Her fingers trembled when she traced the uneven curve of her name, written in the same bubbly handwriting that Kendall used for student council flyers. She didn't ask to be removed. She didn't go to the office or plead with a teacher. She went home, shut herself in her room, and cried into her pillow, muffling every sob so her mama wouldn't hear from the kitchen downstairs. Because in Jasmine's world, trouble was a luxury. She was taught to keep her head down, finish her homework, and never give anyone a reason to say she didn't belong. But something shifted that night. She stared at herself in the mirror, cheeks blotchy and eyes red, and remembered how her mother once said, "Don't you ever let anybody make you feel small, baby girl. You are made of the same breath God gave stars." That's when she reached under her bed and pulled out the old Bluetooth speaker her cousin had given her last Christmas, still barely working but enough for practice. She placed it on the desk and connected it to her cracked phone, scrolling through the playlists she kept private, the ones labeled Someday and If I Were Brave. Her fingers hovered over one track, then tapped play. The beat dropped, an R&B remix with orchestral strings and a slow, haunting rhythm, and Jasmine moved. Not like the dancers in the school gym, not with perfect extensions or rehearsed spins, but with raw, aching intention. Her arms told stories. Her feet, though heavy, found grace in grounded movement. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't think about what people would say. She danced like her chest was on fire and only motion could put it out. 2 nights later, the gym was packed. Parents and business casual clutched iPhones, cheerleaders adjusted their bows, and backstage buzzed with nerves and hairspray. Jasmine stood near the curtain, wearing a simple black t-shirt, leggings, and sneakers that had seen better days. Her glasses were tucked in her pocket. She didn't want them to fall. She could hear the chatter from the audience. Her name had been whispered all day. The girl who didn't talk. The maid's daughter. The one they signed up as a joke. Next up, Jasmine Carter. There was a pause. A single snicker. Then silence. She stepped onto the stage slowly, heartbeat drumming so loudly she could feel it in her fingertips. The light hit her face, bright and blinding. And somewhere in the crowd, she could swear she saw Kendall smirking. But Jasmine didn't look away. She set her phone on the floor, hit play, and as the music began, something incredible happened. Jasmine began to move, not awkwardly, not like a shy girl forced to perform, but with a quiet storm building in her chest. The kind of storm that had waited too long to be seen. Her arms moved like ink in water, her footwork grounded in rhythm that pulsed with emotional clarity. There was nothing to laugh at, nothing ironic, only truth. By the time the first chorus ended, the crowd was no longer whispering. They were staring, stunned, as the girl they thought they knew became something they couldn't name. Something beautiful, something powerful, something unforgettable. For a moment, just a moment, the room seemed to pause. Not because the music had stopped, but because something had shifted. The hush that settled over the gym wasn't just silence. It was recognition. Something in the way Jasmine moved, how her arms stretched and curved like they were drawing invisible shapes in the air, how her feet stayed close to the ground but her presence soared, made it clear. This wasn't a performance thrown together at the last second. This wasn't the awkward flailing they expected to snicker at. This was intentional. By the time the final note faded and she stood still in the center of the stage, chest rising with short breaths, the crowd was still quiet. Not out of confusion, but reverence. A full heartbeat passed. Then another. And then someone clapped. It was a slow, uncertain sound at first, one pair of hands striking in the middle rows. Then 2 more joined. Then 10. Then it rippled through the gym like a gust of wind shaking the leaves of an old tree, swelling into a thunder of applause so sudden, so full, it made Jasmine flinch. She didn't smile. She just nodded, bowed once, and walked off the stage with her head high, her breath still shaky but her steps firm. She didn't look to the left or right. She didn't need to. She knew. Backstage, Kendall Chalmers was frozen with a tightly clenched water bottle in her hand and an expression that flickered between disbelief and something dangerously close to embarrassment. 2 of her friends, Lexi and Hannah, looked at each other, then toward Kendall, then back at the curtain Jasmine had just disappeared behind. "I thought she was gonna, trip or something," Lexi muttered, not really hiding the confusion in her voice. "Yeah," Hannah added, her tone flat. "That wasn't funny." Kendall forced a short laugh, but it landed too late and too high-pitched. "It was just a joke," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear like the motion could erase what had just happened. Didn't think she'd take it seriously. But the truth was beginning to press in on her like heat through glass. She didn't know Jasmine. Not really. She had seen her, always in the corner of the cafeteria, reading books too thick for 8th grade and wearing headphones that muffled the world. She had heard her voice maybe 3 times in 4 years. But what she had just witnessed on that stage wasn't someone begging for attention. It was someone claiming space. And worse, people loved it. While Kendall stood stewing in her own disbelief, Jasmine slipped out the back door of the gymnasium and into the cool spring air. She didn't know what to do with her hands. They still tingled. Her face burned, not from shame but from adrenaline, the kind that leaves you shaky and hollow and proud all at once. She didn't expect anyone to follow her, so when she heard the soft footsteps, she flinched and turned. "Hey!" said a girl in a burgundy hoodie and jeans. Her name was Elise. Jasmine knew her from homeroom. She was quiet too, but not invisible. She had a sharp wit and once stood up to a substitute who made a rude joke about a student's accent. "That was incredible," Elise said. Her voice wasn't giddy like the popular girls. It was careful, sincere. "I just wanted to say that. You didn't look scared at all." Jasmine smiled, finally. It wasn't wide, but it was real. "I was," she said softly. "I still am." "Well," Elise replied, chuckling, "you've got everyone else scared now, especially Kendall." Jasmine didn't reply. She didn't have to. The next day at school, something was different. People moved out of her way in the hallway. Not rudely, but with that cautious curiosity reserved for people who've just surprised the entire social order. A few nodded to her. One girl, a freshman with braces, stopped her near the lockers and asked what song she had danced to. "It was haunting," the girl said. "I loved it." She mumbled a thank you and kept walking, clutching her binder like a shield. She wasn't used to this. Attention, especially positive attention, felt like wearing shoes too big. Exciting but uncomfortable. In the lunchroom, she sat at her usual table in the far corner, but this time Elise sat with her. Then another girl, Mia, from the AV club, slid in with her tray. No one said much at first, but Jasmine noticed how they weren't looking at her like she was a project, or a dare, or a punchline. They were just there. At the center table, Kendall stabbed at her salad without eating it. Her posture was rigid, her eyes following Jasmine like a shadow she couldn't shake. It gnawed at her, the way everything had backfired. She had wanted to make a point, to poke fun at the invisible girl with secondhand shoes and a mother who cleaned her bathroom. But now the girl had a stage, a following, and something Kendall hadn't anticipated: dignity. Later that afternoon, as Jasmine headed to the library, she passed Principal DeWitt in the hallway. He stopped her. "Miss Carter," he said with a smile that touched his eyes. "Your performance last night, that was one of the most moving moments we've had on that stage in a long time. Thank you for showing us something real." Jasmine stammered a polite thank you, cheeks burning. He nodded, then added, "The district is hosting a citywide showcase in a few weeks. Students from every middle school. I think you should consider performing. I can send your name in." She blinked. "Really? I've already had 2 teachers ask me if you're going to." For the rest of the day, Jasmine couldn't stop thinking about it. She told herself it was too much, too fast, that she should lay low and let the buzz fade. But somewhere deep inside, buried beneath layers of self-doubt and years of silence, another thought rose like steam from a warm cup. What if this wasn't an accident? What if the moment that started as a cruel joke could become the beginning of something she had longed for but never dared to ask? A chance, a voice, a stage that was truly hers. By the time the weekend arrived, Jasmine's name had been mentioned in more conversations than she could count. Whispered in passing near the lockers, murmured among the theater kids rehearsing for their spring play, even spoken aloud during a staff meeting. Whereas Powell from the English department had reportedly called her a raw, emotional talent that shouldn't be ignored. Jasmine didn't know how to carry the weight of attention. She had grown up being told to be careful not to break anything in other people's homes, to speak only when spoken to never draw attention to her size or her silence. But now the spotlight had been pushed into her hands, and strange as it felt, it no longer seemed like a curse. At home, her mother noticed the shift. Loretta stood at the kitchen sink, peeling sweet potatoes with the ease of a woman who'd done it since she was a child in Georgia. When Jasmine wandered in and placed her backpack on the chair, quiet but humming. Not the sort of nervous hum that used to come when she was anxious, this was different. Purposeful. Almost joyful. "You've been gliding through the house like you just won the lottery," Loretta said without turning. "I'm almost afraid to ask what's gotten into you." Jasmine smiled as she pulled open the fridge. "Nothing bad. Just stuff at school." Loretta turned then, drying her hands with a faded dish towel. She watched her daughter for a moment, watched the lightness in her shoulders, the calm in her voice, and most of all, the way Jasmine didn't flinch under her gaze. "You did that show, didn't you?" Jasmine paused. "You knew. Baby, I wash those gym floors every week. You think word don't travel?" Loretta crossed the kitchen slowly and placed a warm hand on Jasmine's cheek. "I heard you danced like your soul was on fire. That true?" Jasmine nodded. Loretta kissed her forehead and whispered, "Told you you were made of starlight." That evening, Jasmine sat on her bed with her laptop open, watching a shaky video someone had uploaded to Instagram. It was grainy, the angle too far off to catch her expressions clearly, but the energy was there. She watched herself on stage, and for once, didn't shrink at the sight of her own body. She studied her own movement, the untrained lines, the way her arms sometimes faltered before finding rhythm, and didn't judge herself. She saw the emotion in it, the truth. She saw herself not as others had labeled her, but as someone capable of commanding silence with nothing but presence. She replayed the final 10 seconds 3 times, watching the stillness after her final pose. The crowd's delayed applause, the stunned silence, then the wave of sound. Below the video, dozens of comments bloomed like petals in real time. At Danny writes, "She why did I not know about this girl?" At Lexo13, "Petition to get her to perform at the citywide showcase, please." At Kendall Chalmers, "Crazy how talent shows bring out the most unexpected people, lol." Jasmine stared at that last one. Not cruel, not kind, just vague enough to drip with bitterness. She clicked on Kendall's profile out of curiosity. The last post was a filtered photo of her in rehearsal gear, stretching against a mirror, captioned, "Hard work always rises. Always." Jasmine didn't engage. She closed the app and opened a blank Google Doc. Her fingers hovered above the keys. Then she started typing out ideas for a new performance. Something more intricate, bigger, something worthy of a real stage. The following Monday, Principal DeWitt confirmed she'd been accepted into the citywide showcase. The event would be held in 2 weeks at the Midtown Arts Center, a sweeping venue with velvet curtains and seats that could hold over 1,000. Jasmine nearly dropped her lunch tray when she read the email. Kendall, meanwhile, watched all of it unfold with the uncomfortable awareness that control was slipping through her fingers. She had ruled Lincoln Academy's performance arts world since 6th grade. Her routines, while polished, followed the same formulas. Slick hair buns, pointed toes, crowd-pleasing flips. But now people were talking about Jasmine, not out of politeness or charity, but because she had shaken something in them. After school, Kendall cornered Jasmine in the hallway near the lockers. "Hey," she said, too casually, folding her arms. "You're doing that citywide thing, right?" Jasmine nodded. She felt a tightness coil in her stomach but stood her ground. "Yeah, just got the confirmation." Kendall offered a smile. It didn't reach her eyes. "Cool. Well, don't let it get to your head, okay? I mean, it was one good performance. That doesn't mean you're, like, great now." There it was, the old tone, The one Jasmine had heard all her life. From kids, from neighbors, even sometimes from teachers. The tone that said, "Stay in your lane." But Jasmine just adjusted the strap on her backpack and looked her straight in the eye. "I'm not trying to be great," she said calmly. "I'm trying to be real." And with that, she walked away. As the citywide showcase approached, Jasmine practiced every night. She used the tiny living room as a studio, pushing aside the coffee table and throwing an old blanket over the TV to stop herself from getting distracted by her reflection. Her mother would sit nearby with her Bible open, sometimes reading, sometimes watching, always present. Jasmine's choreography was different this time. It wasn't built on speed or technicality. It was about telling a story, her story, a piece about feeling invisible, about shrinking, about one moment, a spark that made everything erupt. The music she chose was wordless, a piano melody layered with deep cello that swelled like a rising tide. By the night before the event, she was exhausted but ready. She had one shot, and this time she wasn't going to just surprise people. She was going to leave them breathless. The Midtown Arts Center was not a place for the forgotten. Everything about it whispered prestige. The way the golden chandeliers glimmered above the velvet-seated audience, the way the ushers moved with quiet professionalism in black suits and earpieces, and especially the thick red curtains that hung like gates to another world. The moment Jasmine Carter stepped into that building, something in her lungs tightened, not from fear, but from the overwhelming feeling that she had entered a space that was never designed for girls like her. And yet, here she was, in a backstage room where students from all across the district tuned instruments, adjusted makeup, and nervously bounced their knees. Jasmine sat quietly on a folding chair, earbuds in, eyes closed. She wasn't scrolling. She wasn't talking. She was listening to the music, to her breathing, to the steady rhythm of her heartbeat syncing with a memory that had kept her grounded through weeks of practice. Her mother's voice, soft and unwavering, saying, "Don't you ever let anyone make you feel like you were born to watch from the sidelines." Meanwhile, just a few rows from the stage, Loretta Carter sat clutching her purse with both hands, her spine straight, eyes focused. She wore her best dress, an emerald green wrap that complemented her deep skin tone and gave her a kind of quiet authority. She hadn't said much during the drive over, but when Jasmine stepped out of the car in her simple black costume and canvas shoes, Loretta had reached out, straightened the shoulder of her top, and whispered, "Let them see what I've known your whole life." She hadn't said it like a command. She'd said it like a prayer. Backstage, Kendall Chalmers stood in the hallway with her arms folded, watching the monitor as performances cycled through. A string quartet from Fairview Middle, a spoken-word poet from East Heights, a hip-hop group from Roosevelt. Her school, Lincoln Academy, had entered both her solo ballet routine and Jasmine's performance as their two representatives. It hadn't escaped her attention that Jasmine's name now appeared after hers on the program. The closing act, the finale. When she first heard the news, she had scoffed and muttered something about politics. But beneath her carefully brushed hair and poise, there was a storm of something she didn't want to name. Not jealousy. No, Kendall had always been better, more practiced, more recognized. But what she couldn't ignore was the shift she'd noticed since the talent show. Her own Instagram likes had dipped. Teachers who once smiled with familiar indulgence now complimented Jasmine in front of her. Even Lexi had once said, "That Carter girl's dance made me cry. Like, I don't even know why." That had stung more than Kendall cared to admit. And now Jasmine, the maid's daughter, the girl she'd entered in a show as a joke, was standing one performance away from center stage in the city's finest arts venue. As Kendall's name was announced, the lights dimmed and the spotlight circled the floor. Her performance was, as expected, flawless, pointed toes, graceful turns, arms like ribbons. The crowd clapped respectfully. She bowed with a confident smile, but even as she left the stage, she knew it hadn't been enough to hush the whispers Jasmine had stirred. The backstage manager called out, "Jasmine Carter, you're on in 2." Jasmine rose, steady but quiet, and handed her phone to the AV tech. "Track 3, please. The long one, with the cello intro." She stepped into the wings and waited, the thick velvet curtain a breath away from her face, the muffled crowd behind it shifting in their seats. And then her name. Now, closing the evening with an original solo performance. Jasmine Carter, representing Lincoln Academy. The lights went down, the curtain rose, and she walked out. She stood in silence for a full 5 seconds, eyes lowered, arms by her side. No flashy smile, no bow. The audience barely breathed. Then the music began, slow, with a low cello thrum that trembled like something waking from sleep. Jasmine lifted her head and moved. But this was not like before. This was something else. Her body didn't just dance. It testified. Her arms opened and closed like they were releasing secrets. Her feet carried her in arcs and spirals that felt like waves crashing and then pulling away again. Her movement was vulnerable, almost broken in parts, like she was building herself from dust right there on the stage. She fell to her knees at one point, her back arched, and the music fell silent. And in that silence, the entire room felt like it stopped breathing. Then, without missing a beat, she rose again. And when she did, the music swelled. Jasmine spun once, not for show, but as if she were shedding everything that had ever been thrown at her. Every comment about her size, every snicker behind her back, every time she had been called Maid's daughter, like it was a stain instead of a story. And in that final pose, one knee bent, arms curved above her head like a crown. She didn't look out at the audience. She looked up, as though she were claiming something higher. The music stopped. The stage dimmed. Silence. Then the first clap. Then 5. Then a roaring wave. A full standing ovation. The sound of feet pounding the floorboards. Cheering. Whistling. Hands above heads. An elderly man in the third row wiped his eyes. 2 younger dancers hugged. One of the judges stood. Another clutched her scoring pad and just nodded. Jasmine lowered her arms slowly and bowed, her breath ragged, her eyes glistening. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. She exited the stage the way she had entered, slow, deliberate, steady. Backstage, Kendall was still standing near the hallway, her face unreadable. She didn't say anything as Jasmine passed her, but their eyes met. And for the first time, Kendall looked away first. That night, after the showcase ended and the crowds poured out into the cool city air, Jasmine and Loretta stood outside the Midtown doors, their arms wrapped in thin jackets, the night breeze brushing past them gently. "Well?" her mother asked, her voice warm. Jasmine looked up at the stars, the sky wide and indifferent. I think they finally saw me." Loretta leaned in, kissed the top of her daughter's head, and whispered, "Baby, you made them look." And for the first time in her life, Jasmine believed it. The days that followed the citywide showcase were unlike anything Jasmine Carter had ever known. By Monday morning, the school was humming with the echoes of what had happened that weekend. Teachers were still talking about the performance, some even replaying shaky audience videos on their phones between classes. Mr. Abram, the drama teacher, paused a science class just to mention her name, saying, "When someone tells their truth on stage, it doesn't matter how many pirouettes they can do. What matters is that you felt something. Jasmine Carter made us feel." The hallway, once a path she walked invisible, now seemed to part for her. Not with awe, not with fear, with respect. Kendall Chalmers didn't say a word. She passed Jasmine twice that day. No glares, no smirks, just silence. A silence more powerful than 100 comments. A silence that admitted, without saying it out loud, you changed something. And I don't know how to undo it. By the end of the week, Jasmine had been invited to join the school's elite performing arts group, not as a token, not as a charity case, but because they needed her. The instructor said, "You see movement differently. You feel before you choreograph. That's rare. That's art." She didn't say yes right away. Jasmine wasn't in a hurry to be folded into institutions that once ignored her. But it felt different now. The difference was that she had the power to choose. She could say yes on her terms. Meanwhile, Loretta Carter was receiving her own kind of recognition. The superintendent's office sent a letter thanking her for her years of service to the district and inviting her to a staff appreciation banquet. Something that, as far as anyone could remember, no school janitor or maid had been invited to before. Loretta simply smiled and said, "About time they realized who's really been holding these walls up." 1 week later, Jasmine stood in front of her bedroom mirror. No audience, no music, just her reflection. She didn't look away anymore. Her curves hadn't vanished. Her scars, emotional and otherwise, hadn't healed overnight. But something had shifted, not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. She was no longer the girl hiding behind a book or the shadow in the auditorium corner. She was the girl who took the stage and reclaimed her name. And when she danced now, she didn't do it to prove anything. She danced to remember that once they tried to laugh, and then they cried, and then they stood,